So in a minute, we're going to bring up the panel, but as Ron said, we're going to kind of tie in the CTE certification exam reimbursements. All right. Well, the legislature made a law that allows TEA to reimburse school districts for student exams taken and passed for a license or certification. The last day to submit those is going to be August the 5th this year, 2016, and that is on a first-come, first-served basis. And if we still have funds available, we have $500,000 to give away, and right now we're about 50% left. So don't hesitate. Get those turned in as quick as you can. Even if you don't have all the certifications, turn in what you have. You can always submit another one later, so you might get a little bit. The certifications, as Ron said, that we will reimburse for are on the program effectiveness report. So like we talked about earlier, those other courses, we look at those and we decide what's going to go on the per list, and we get those added. When we review those in January, we add those to get them on the list that's going to get reimbursed for next school year. So we looked at them in January. So the per list is different than last year if you submitted a reimbursement form. Some I've gotten one problem out there is that the old per list from last year is getting pulled up, and so I'm having to kick those back because they're trying to get reimbursed for exams that are taken off. Sometimes we take off exams, and sometimes we add exams. So make sure you're using the most current, and the way you know you're getting the most current is to be on our listserv, because we send it out to the administrator address letter, the letter and the link to the new program effectiveness report. So all this is tying together. Make sure you're staying current with all the information. So the student must have passed these exams by July 31st to get it reimbursed, and we're only going to reimburse for up to $350. So if it costs $450 at your cost, we're going to give you $350. So when you turn in your report, make sure you put $350 if that's the max. Yes, ma'am.
And you submit each year for one student, so they took an exam as an 11th grader and then a different one as a senior?
No. Well,
or is it
one student? Yeah, each year is different.
Right. So
but for this year, one exam per student.
Okay. And then reimbursed. Suppose you don't get Perkins funds, but your students do take certification exams.
So as Ron said, we can only reimburse for these exams that weren't paid with Perkins funds. But if they used other funds, if the student paid for it and the district paid the student and then the district's getting reimbursed, you can do that as long as it's not Perkins funds. Yes?
When she asked just now, correct me if I'm wrong, who was that asked that question? Were you saying that your school does not receive Perkins funding whatsoever?
That's correct.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, there are some.
But that's because we've never applied for it.
Okay, but and that's a good question, because I would have known the answer to that. So if a school that's not receiving Perkins uses local funding to pay for tests, they can apply for reimbursement under the Perkins grant through the state of Texas.
Well, actually, no, because they did not. That's right. They wouldn't have. They wouldn't be. They wouldn't have a per list. So yeah, you wouldn't get reimbursed. That's true. Yeah, I didn't catch that. Yes.
So if we have an industry standard piece of equipment that kids are getting certified on, but there's not a cost for the certification, but there was a cost for the piece of equipment, then the equipment does provide a certification, as they go through the computer modules on that piece of equipment. Can we pay for the piece of equipment divided out by the number of kids who are being serviced on? It's a certain it's a brake certification that they're getting using a brake laser machine.
But it's not an ASE certification.
It is not an ASE certification.
So no.
But it's needed for ASE certification. That is true. Yeah. So it's that's true.
It's got to be a certification that the students get a piece of paper for.
They do get a piece of paper for it.
For an assessment.
Yeah. It's good. Assessment, yeah. In the program, it's got to be tied to the per list. So, I mean,
so I can write it in on other?
Well, you could write it in, but we'd have to review it. It probably won't make it.
Yeah.
on the per list.
There would be other ways to fund that, but not through the exam reimbursement, right?
Right. And there are, so it was just one of the questions. It's like, well, they're getting certifications, and it's an industry piece of equipment, so, but
And you
there's
probably
no cost for the
did pay for
exam.
that piece of equipment with Perkins, which is great, so you've already paid for it. So that's great. So you've already done it.
Yeah, it's a good tool that, you know, it's a good a good benefit for the districts if you're taking the Perkins grant and you're using the per list, but you can't use Perkins funds to pay for these exams. Lessons on the per.
John, I have a question. Did you say if a student pays for the exam and the school district reimburses the student, then the school district can get reimbursed?
Correct. All right, any other questions on this? All right. Well, we're going to call up our panel. I think the next thing we're going to do is talk about licensures and certifications, so we need our panel to come up here, right? Well, as our panel comes up, our panel is highly respected in the CTE community. They provide a lot of assistance to CTE and to people that are in CTE, and they graciously agree every year to come and be part of the Leadership Academy because they want you to be successful. And so they want to make sure you're successful CTE administrators, and that's why they dedicate their time and knowledge to help you out. Just a little bit about our panel here. Ann Moulder has 11 years in health science. She started out as a nurse and a manager in the field and went into teaching. High school. She served 16 years as a school administrator in charge of CTE and GT, and now is an educational consultant, which we appreciate her coming back every year. David Barrier has 29 years in education. He's a CTE director at Deer Park, as you already know that. 12 years there. Got Greg Ship. He's an administrative coordinator in career and technical education at Conroe ISD. He's been a teacher and a counselor and a campus administrator. We've got Michael Chapman. He's at Education Service Center 9 in Wichita Falls. He's been in education for 15 years and 9 years at the Service Center, and he's got 20 years in the Air Force. We appreciate that. We've got Vicki Hayhurst. She's at Region 14. She's got 20 years in education, 10 years at the ESC, and 3 years in CTE, and she has a lot of experience in the community liaison, which she's going to talk about in a little bit. All right, so let's get started. We're going to ask them a few questions. And first, Ann, you're up.
All right.
Okay, so what are some of the most common misunderstandings new CTE administrators might have about student certifications and licensures?
Well, it's been addressed already, but one of the most common questions that is reported back to us about misunderstanding is folks tend to see the PER and think that's the list. You know, that's what I need to go off of. And that's really not the case. The best way to determine certifications that are appropriate for your district is to take a look at your kids and determine what would benefit them the best. My background is health science, and so they asked me to give an example in that programming. And some of the possible certifications kids could earn in a health science program might be an EMT license. It might be a CNA certification for certified nursing assistant, or it might be a pharmacy tech certification. All three are valid and effective capstone ends with kids. They all show technical achievement. They all reflect work that kids are doing that's meaningful, but they're not at all alike. And the best way to decide if you were running a health science program and considering those three, the best way to determine which one is right for our district is take a look at your kids. Where are they going? What are their aspirations? What are the likelihoods of, their majors as they push on to college and look ahead? Or what are their post-secondary goals? And track that a little bit, and you can make a very clear determination on what would be most effective. I taught at Clear Lake High School. I had a ton of kids that were successfully going pre-med and then going on to med school or physical therapy. in our programming there, it made a lot more sense for us to offer EMT programming and pharmacy tech because that was across the board effective for the kids with the majors they were considering. Now, I've worked in another school district prior to that time, and the CNA thing was more effective at that time. And that was back in the dark ages. But hey, you know, so just go through that kind of process. Think about your kids, your you know, their aspirations, and that's better than the PER. The PER is just what our state folks are reporting back to the feds. It's really all it is. It's what they're reporting back to the federal government.
David, our next question is for you.
All right.
How does Deer Park ISD identify which certifications or licensures exams to offer its students?
Well, I think Ron addressed this really well, and then Ann just touched on it. You have to choose the certifications along with the help of your teachers. They're vital in picking certifications. But you have to choose the certifications that your students are going to get the most good out of. Deer Park is on the industrial side of Houston. And as close as Katy is to us, I promise you, their students are going to will value certifications that are different from ours. So whatever your district is, I couldn't hardly imagine the difference between Houston, Austin, and Dallas. I mean, we're heavy petrochemical. The NCCER is very popular in our area. If you go to Austin, I'm sure a lot of IT, and you go to Dallas, it's going to be finance and business. So those sort of things help us decide. And I encourage all of my teachers to offer at least one certification in their program area. Sometimes it's sort of like pulling teeth to do that, but if you work with them and show them the value of the certification, it's something that I think the teachers will tie into. And once some of their kids get certifications, then they start bragging about, hey, we got this many certifications last time. The one thing I do want to kind of caution the folks in here is, like Diane said, there's 1,500 STEM certifications coming out. Make sure that certification is valued. Make sure it really means something, because people will sell you anything. Okay? So I know of a certification that is a very, very hands-on certification, and you can get it all online. So I'm thinking, I don't know if that's one we want to look at. So that's kind of the way we look at it. We also use our advisory council or advisory committee to make recommendations.
Okay, Mr. Shipp, you're up next. How does Conroe ISD identify which certifications or licensures to offer its students, and how are there any eligibility requirements placed on the students before they can sit for an exam?
I'm glad you asked me that question. I want to come right here. You were talking about industry input. We meet with the advisory committee. Our local community college, Lone Star College, has a model advisory committee. It's the best advisory committee I've ever been a part of. My superintendent sits on that. He invited me to one of the advisory committee meetings to present our license and certification information. I was pretty excited. Industry folks, not so much. So what we found out from that, from NOV, National Oil Well Varco, they have 2 manufacturing plants in our industrial center. We use Revit. We use a couple of other things. What we found out from the engineers is that SoftWorks is the industry standard. So we made a commitment to go back then to our district with a proposal to put SoftWorks, SolidWorks into place. So that's a good example of using industry input to adjust what we're trying to do with our students. The reason that's important is every year when we sign our provisions and assurances for funding, we're guaranteeing the Texas Education Agency, but also our students, that we're providing them a state-of-the-art industry standard education. If we are using credentials that are meaningless in entry, then we're doing a disservice to our students. So we're always looking at, are our licenses and certifications of value? One of the areas that we are expanding, 2 areas, is our health science program. We're putting in another CNA program. It'll be dual credit. We're also expanding our cosmetology. We have 2 cosmetology schools, licensed cosmetology schools. What we look at is our pre-enrollment data, and this is important. We're looking at 3 years worth of data. We're looking at pre-enrollment. Where are students signing up? Where do we have interest beyond capacity? how does that line up with demand occupations in the Gulf Coast? Is there a demand for this occupation? Okay, and then what are our enrollment numbers looking at? So we're looking at 3 years worth of data, looking at programs of study, and looking at industry credentials that go with it. And the other thing was, how do we set standards for the students? I'll give you a great example. We put culinary arts in. When I came to Conroe ISD in 2010, the ball was rolling on culinary arts on 6 high school campuses. They had done no facilities study. There were no commercial kitchens, but they were signing kids up for culinary arts. And I said, no, that's not culinary arts. So we put together an advisory committee made up the Texas Restaurant Association, Greater Houston Restaurant Association, Montgomery County Restaurant Association. We now have 2 full commercial kitchens in an old high school kitchen they were running ISS in. We set the standard, and this was my mantra from the beginning. We don't exist to cook your breakfast or serve you lunch, okay? We're not going to be on this campus to make your pies for Thanksgiving. We are teaching skills. So in order to get into the district program, we identified an entry-level certificate, ServSafe. So if students want into the district program, they have to pass the ServSafe certification as a junior and have demonstrated 9 skills. We think that's important because we're trying to help them understand that there's a level of skill required to be successful at the post-secondary level. We don't view our licenses and certifications as terminal education. We view it as a pathway to continue their post-secondary success, whether that's going to a 2-year, 4-year college or beyond. But we do set standards for certifications that way.
Good. Thank you. Mr. Chapman, you're up next.
I'm up.
What assistance can ESCs provide regarding student industry certifications and licensures?
One of the things that I would suggest that that you do when you're looking for information on those certification and licensures is to contact your ESCCPE specialist or representative. And the reason why I say that is because every year we have a professional development where we visit one of the service centers and we go out and we take a look at industry and we bring that information back so that we can provide that information to you. We were in Lubbock last year, I believe it was Lubbock, and we went around, we looked at a lot of industry in Lubbock so that we have, firsthand knowledge so that we can come back and share that information with you guys. So my advice would be contact your ESC CTE specialist because they're in the fields, they're the ones they're working, trying to get this information for you, and it's a very good resource for that.
Thank you. All right. Earlier I did not say where Region 14 was, I don't think, but it's in Abilene. And Ms. Hayhurst is going to talk to us about, I understand you're in Abilene, and has launched a regional initiative to identify industry certifications and licensures. Would you take a few moments to share with us what's happening in Abilene?
Okay. In about February, the Chamber of Commerce of Abilene, Texas, decided that they needed to create a committee for the Abilene area and the surrounding counties to really look at what the needs were for the Abilene area to bring people in and to retain them. And because of this spinoff, these were the people, this was the members of the committee, which was the Chamber of Commerce, the Economic Development Board, the Workforce, 4-year institutions, which we have 3 private ones in the Abilene area, the 2-year college, the Career Institute, which we have TSTC, and Abilene ISD and Wiley ISD, and then business partners. So everybody was brought together. It was led by a business person that owns a very large company in Abilene, Texas. And what it was to really look at how, as businesses, can we connect, how they could better connect with the education system within the Abilene district. So it's been quite a journey. We met every other Tuesday for 3 hours on each meeting. Since we started that in February and we're finishing up in July. And we've been able to tour all the different partners and learn more about those partnerships and just gain more information. It's been very informational for everybody on the committee. I forgot. And they had an ESC representative on there too. When I first was asked to serve on it, I didn't really know where my capacity would be in it, but I was able to bring a lot of information into about career and technical education for everybody on the committee, so that's been helpful with that. But we are re-looking at what we really want to look at is our skilled labor in that area, because we have a lot of plumbing, electrical, and HVAC, but we didn't have any way to fill those needs as far as employment. And we do have a low employment rate in Abilene, Texas, but what we have a hard time with is retaining that. And so we needed to look at it very broad across, because a lot of times we can get people in places, but then a spouse gets a better job somewhere else, so it takes them out of the community. So it's a very interesting project, and it's going to continue. The Chamber is actually going to hire a position for someone to continue that work on after this committee. So it's been a huge mindset for the community.
All right, thank you. Any questions for our panelists that you would like to get clarification on? All right. Oh, okay. Yes.
So on the PER, if you're entering other certifications and we're not capturing the numbers of those others that we said we don't need to put the number data, are we putting in other as just like a cumulative number of any of those that are listed below? I mean, like, I think interesting, like, so Conroe, you have specific things that are relative. How many of those certifications are we actually capturing, and who else is doing that? Are we getting numbers that are associated to it to say these are ones that are showing up in various points of?
Yeah. So if everybody that turns in a PER report writes in a certification, then our grants people, they can pull the data. And then we'll see, they can actually sort it, and we'll see we got 100 districts turned into certification, so that's kind of one we would target to look at. So yes,
what if it's one kid versus what if it's 50 kids? Or I mean, you're not putting the quantity of kids.
Yeah, we're not putting the quantity on there, but it doesn't pull the quantity. Even though it prints out, like if you put Rivet and you put 50 students, it'll print that out for us. But as far as like how many districts are offering Rivet.
Well, John, and it's reporting, your PER is reporting to the federal government.
Right.
A specific narrow definition.
Right.
Which is minimal compared to what we know benefits kids. So it's required reporting. We want to report to the feds the way they want to receive it, but we also want to be open to doing other things that we know are going to benefit students.
Yeah, that's the part I'm thinking. It would just be helpful. I mean, for
right.
all of the rest of us, you know,
yeah.
that if we're collecting data and we know that this many, you know,
right.
100 kids are taking that, like, let's, more than it is to federal, like, let's look at how that can benefit our other
right.
ISDs.
And the CTAP conference that Greg mentioned earlier today, it has presentations with districts that are doing some innovative things like that. So, you know, there are ways to get that information, just not off the PER. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one other clarification, I think I kind of confused the issue, but the law, as far as the reimbursement goes, doesn't talk about Perkins, but what the law does say is what TEA has is that it has to be on the program effectiveness report, but it doesn't really say you had to be a grant taker to get reimbursed. So just clarify that.
Can I add one thing? I know Houston ISD has done an amazing job with this, but if you want to know what the job market's like, Texas Workforce Commission is a great resource.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Everybody has their own region, kind of like your service center.
Right.
So those guys,
They'll come to your advisory committee. They'll report to your
they're good
district.
folks.
I think we have one more question in the back. Mr. Fowler?
Oh. I really like that idea of talking to the Texas Workforce Commission because they do have a lot of information about employment skills and needs and licensures and certifications. But I wanted to add just, and I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on this, but there is a performance acknowledgement in the graduation requirements that is not related to PER, although it has some of the same characteristics that you have to have to be on the PER. But it's not the same thing. So you can, if you're interested in showing your students performing well and getting licensures and certifications, then you as the district can make that determination. The criteria is about the same as it is for the PER, but it's not whether it's on the list or not. It's up to the individual district to do that. And I know, my sense is a lot of people write things on the PER in the other category because they want to show somebody who looks at their report, hey, we're doing something, our students are getting certifications, I'm going to report them whether they're going to get on the, whether they're on the PER list or not. Do you know what I'm saying? Just because they want to show what they're doing. Well, if they're of high quality and they're not on the PER, you can still have your students get performance acknowledgments, which will be valuable. Those are reported on their transcript. And so that's another way for you to get student recognition and program recognition in part of the foundation graduation high school program. Just mention that.
PER list is purely a reporting of our state to the federal government.
Yes.
In the definition that they gave us on what they want to hear. But we do certifications. Like I didn't mention CPR and first aid certification and health science, which are fabulous, great skills. They don't meet the definition that PER is asking to be reported to the feds, but they're great. And our intro to health science kids take those certifications and they benefit from it.
Do districts get extra funding because they put all these certifications on there? I know Ron talked about 100 certifications and you get 75%. Does that help your funding any with Perkins and you get more money?
I heard you had a private fund for that, right? No.
So that's a myth, right?
It is a myth.
So
it is. That's a misunderstanding. At one point there was some just casual conversation about that, and that's actually unfounded. But
yeah, and what happens is we'll get calls and they'll say, well, my district wants me to write this on the PER.
So
I said, well, go ahead and put it in the other if it makes them happy, but it's not going to help you any, really.
Think of your kids and how they'll benefit in your community and what the needs are, and find that crossroads there.
I'd like to clarify.
Yes.
I have something in my notes, and I just want to clarify that I wrote it correctly. You can only pay for certifications with Perkins funds that are on the PER. Is that
Can only
correct?
pay for
I can only purchase certifications for students if it's on PER. For example, OSHA. Can I use Perkins funds to pay for OSHA certifications?
You cannot. It's got to be on the PER list to purchase it with Perkins funds. You can use state funds.
You can use other funding sources.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about other funds for just a minute, because we've had this conversation. Those of you who were at the ESCCPE, you heard the discussion about from our Title I person at TEA. It is possible, and we're still trying to work out all the details here, but you need to talk to your Title I person because it is possible to use Title I Part A funds, statewide funds, for licensures and certifications if the need is there. Takes that need, it has to be part of your need assessment. There needs to be a needs assessment done. That's got to be part of your plan for your district or your campus going forward. But it is possible because the changes in ESSA have made it possible for Title I Part A funds to be used to pay for licensures and certifications. Statewide only.
There's some rules with that. Follow those rules.
And school.
Yes, follow those rules.
I was going to add one note that any Title I Part A funds are to be used must be in the campus improvement plan.
That's one of the rules.
Yeah, I mean, you just got to really dig into the rules. It's got quite a few little.
Travis was paying attention.
He was. He probably has the slides with him. Any other questions for our panelists? Questions come to mind? All right, well, thank you very much.